And this is Bald Mongoose.
And welcome to Geek Channel. Today we're having a special podcast on horror and gaming and other forms of nerddom.
Yep. Today we're talking about stuff like subgenres of horror and how popular YouTubes are making horror more accessible to people who would normally be scared to play games on their own. Another thing we're going to be talking about today is how video games have been influenced by movies and how now movies are being influenced by video games.
Not to mention, board games, card games, and tabletop itself have been influenced by the horror industry overall.
Hey, do you hear that?
No, I don't really hear anything, but as long as the mic's not picking it up, it's fine. Let's get back to work.
Alright guys, first thing we're going to be talking about is... Ah!
Okay, let's see. What were these idiots going to talk about? Well, this is shit. Hello, everybody. My name is Punk Princess.
And I am Fluffy Cobra.
And we're taking over this podcast because our others are kind of, well, stupid when it comes to this sort of thing.
They're too boring to talk about horror and gaming properly.
Well, I wouldn't say boring, just too sweet. Welcome to the darker side of strange, ladies and gentlemen, as we're going to delve into the truly horrific side of horror in nerddom. Now, let's get started. Consider this, ladies and gentlemen. Every person out there, regardless of who they are, has a dark side, and we all need to find an outlet for this dark side. Games today are featuring more and more horrific and graphic scenes that allow us to de-stress and detox and release these urges. And in fact, one of the most popular games on Twitch today is called Dead by Daylight, allowing you to fulfill your fantasies as a slasher killer, playing out your every desire against your helpless victims who are also other players.
Yes, this sort of cathartic experience allows you the full feel of being a slasher without having to get your clothes bloody.
And have to pay the dry cleaning bill or bury the bodies, which can be really a pain in the ass. Of course, there are other things you need to consider when talking about horror and gaming as well. And in fact, the influence it has had on television, movies, and so many other things. In fact, some of our favorite YouTubers out there have experienced horror firsthand and have shared it with all of you. Now, when we're going to talk about that, we'll do it later because it's kind of boring. But anyway, some of our favorite tabletop games as to date have been Call of Cthulhu, Ravenloft.
All flesh must be eaten.
That's Fluffy's favorite.
And Shadow of the Demon Lord.
Which is one of my personal faves. And several other things. And in fact, some of the more recent tabletop games, such as Shadowrun in its newer editions, feature a darker side to its gameplay that allows players to truly indulge in their more evil side to its fullest extent. Normally, most GMs won't allow players to go into their more evil side of the campaign. Well, nowadays it's kind of normal to allow for evil campaigns to exist. And entire modules have been written just for that.
It's true, there are entire adventure paths and modules dedicated to letting you finally play the bad guy. One of my favorite adventures is for Savage Worlds, and it's entitled Necessary Evil, the premise of which is that the world's superheroes were all slain, and the only people left to stop the alien invaders are the world's supervillains. While not a horror game, it does let you indulge all your evil proclivities.
Yep. Now, with that being said, there are also many board games out there that allow you to indulge your darker side while exploring the other aspects of horror as it is, such as Betrayal on the House on the Hill, any of the murder mystery games, Mysterium, and several other things such as Level 7, and a couple of other interesting little games that we'll get into later. These games allow for the players to either play against the game environment itself or each other, which makes for an interesting experience all around. And specifically for Betrayal on House on the Hill, it just splits the difference and allows you to play both against the game and then against one, if not more, of the other players in the game, which is very interesting to me.
Yes, and you don't know going in what the scenario is going to be.
Yep, it has multiple endings based on what you find and which room you find it in, which turns out to be the more interesting experience in my opinion. I love multiple ending games. It's so much fun.
True, it gives a lot of freedom to the players.
And speaking of horror, the Arkham horror games for Batman give an entirely new twist for video games. They're frightening, indulging, and allow you to experience through Batman's eyes truly horrific experiences that happen both in and out of the asylum.
Yes, the Arkham Asylum games do feature quite a lot of horror aspects in them. Some more than others, with the original being probably, in my opinion, the one dealing most directly with the horrors involving insanity and...
But the new VR game that has just come out really goes back to the original game's feel of terror, I think, and has done a very good job about showcasing the more frightening aspects of Arkham Asylum. Now, if we're going to get into that, there are so many games out there that are just not even being looked at, that are indie games that are truly terrifying. I personally love the Amnesia games, always have. Markiplier is one of my favorites for that. Though, truth be told, I love the Darkiplier aspect that he brings to that. It's so much fun. Anyway, so, with that being said, looking at these games, most people think, oh, it's not for me. Well, have you tried it? It's like riding a roller coaster. You don't know you like it until you try it.
Yes, and you don't know that you dislike it until you try it either.
This is very true.
I recommend giving at least a few different horror games in different genres a try before you try to write them off.
Because there are many different styles of horror game, everything from slasher to mystery. Now, with that being said, another big thing that's been happening recently with the Five Nights at Freddy's rise to grandeur has been haunted houses themed based on horror games. LARPs have gone into big to-dos about upping the ante on their horror events each year just to keep up with that fill of terror that players really want this time of year. And honestly, I truly appreciate it because really, I want that experience of being scared. And I love scaring my fellow players. To be fair, some of my favorite LARPs have always been the most frightening.
Most of my LARPing experience was a game called Dystopia Rising, which is a post-apocalyptic horror LARP. And there I found myself able to adequately scare the hell out of my fellow players while I myself dealt with such things as the undead and some rather adult themes regarding the horror we dealt with.
Now remember, adult-themed games are for adults. Wink, wink. So be careful when looking at these kinds of games. Don't do anything silly. Games don't make serial killers, people. It's kind of stupid to think that. But bear in mind, all of these kinds of games will have adult themes to them. One of the more interesting games that I found most recently, called Spoopy's House of Horrors.
Spoopy's House of Jump Scares.
Spoopy House of Jump Scares. Sorry, that was my bad. Markiplier played it. You would think it was childish at first, but it's actually pretty dang scary out there. And wow. Did I just say dang?
That dang word just creeps into conversation.
I've been listening way too much to my other. Anyhow. So, with that in mind, people, you need to be aware. Horror is going to seep into every aspect of gaming. It's a necessary part of it. Everything from jump scares to basic combat. Undead, goblins, ogres, it's all there. Even some of your favorite movies have horror aspects. Lord of the Rings, one of my favorite sequences in the entire movie, was when they were in the mines of Moria. It was creepy, it was terrifying, and it was absolutely visually stunning. And the tragic end of all of it. Heartrending. Loved it. What do you think?
I agree. I think the more horror creeps into regular films and video games, the better off we, as geeks who enjoy it, are going to be. There are many aspects of horror that pop up in many different genres. The most common, of course, being the sort of stealth action genres like Metal Gear. Those games almost always feature some sort of horror aspect, usually in the guise of a psychic villain.
Or jump scares.
Or jump scares.
Though, jump scares I feel have been overused simply because they're the easiest to use. It's kind of one of those things that everybody's done it at least a little. But I love seeing them used in new ways, like in the FNAF games. The jump scares there were unique and interesting, making a person completely helpless. That was a unique twist.
Yeah, it's a dreadfully boring series, though. I mean, certainly not for me. I just about fall asleep during it.
Oh, please. You would love to tie somebody to a chair and make them sit through that.
Yes, because I love watching the people scream. If I'm playing by myself, there's no interest.
Yeah, fair enough. Anyway, so, in my personal opinion, horror is something that you need to embrace. It's something that you need to enjoy. It's something you should experience teaspoon by teaspoon for yourself. That way you can learn to truly embrace the madness. Because, come on, what horror doesn't come with a little madness? With that being said, bear in mind that always try to do it in moderation. You don't want to overindulge. If you do, it'll get boring.
Yes, that is the greatest danger of overindulgence. Too much of a good thing can make it become dull.
Let's see. Oh, and let's never forget that some of the best horror genres, horror series have spawned some of the most interesting video games out there. Alien and Aliens spawned an amazing game. We're not counting the rest of the movies. They made an amazing game called Alien Isolation. That was absolutely fabulous. Loved it. So creepy.
Yes, quite good. I love the idea of being stranded and alone with an unstoppable killer after you.
And then all the robots on the ship also trying to kill you. Because they just want to be considered real boys. The idea of that just creeps me out to no end. I love it. That spine-chilling feeling when all the things that are supposed to be helping you just makes your skin crawl when they turn against you and you're all alone. Oh, poor me. What do I do? Anyway, so remember, all you trick-or-treaters out there, when it comes to this Halloween, don't forget the tricks along with your treats to make your horrifying Halloween more fun. This has been Punk Princess.
And this is the Fluffy Cobra.
And we'll see you next time that those two little goody two-shoes need to take a break. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, guys. Sorry about that.
Did they call us goody two-shoes, or did I imagine that?
No, I'm pretty sure they did.
Well,
This is Nerd Girl back.
this is Mongoose.
Hey, I think we just got mugged by our evil twins.
Yeah, you had to use a sap. Back of my head's all swollen.
I'll go get you some ice.
That's alright, let's finish talking about whatever we were talking about before. So, horror and gaming. We were gonna go over the subgenres first, right?
Yeah, subgenres. There's mystery, thriller, slasher, zombie, or post-apocalyptic,
Survival horror.
Survival horror. Post-apocalyptic and survival sometimes overlap, but they're not always the same thing.
Yeah. But
sorry, guys. They didn't do anything weird, did they?
Yeah, they might have, but you know what? I'm not going to worry about that right now.
Yeah, let's just get this podcast out, and then maybe a trip to the hospital. Ow.
All right. So the different genres we were talking about. The first is mystery horror, and that covers games along the lines of board games like Arkham Horror, and even to some degree Clue, where you're trying to solve the mystery. Another great example is one of Nerd's favorite games, Mysterium.
This game features a whole lot of different endings where you are trying to help ghosts figure out how they died. And it's really interesting, multiple endings, and you never know who's right until the very end. So it's actually really unique. It's for a group of 3 to, I believe, 10 players. So it's a really great party game. It's a lot of fun. We've played it several times here, and we still haven't even gotten all the endings. So it's one of those really awesome games that is a lot of fun. You can have just as much fun playing the ghost as you can playing one of the psychic mediums that are investigating the mansion. So I would highly recommend that. Another great party game setup are the murder mystery games such as Pasta, Passion, and Poisons, or the Masked Murder Mystery Gala, and various other games like that that have multiple endings, multiple characters, and they're meant for at least 6 people up to 12 people, where you throw a big party, have lots of fun, lots of food, and try to figure out who killed who.
A lot of good fun can be had there, especially for the social aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. It's basically like a pre-planned mini LARP module in a box.
That's a very good way to put it.
Oh yeah.
All right, the second big subgenre is survival horror, and this game, like this, at least in video games, really began with stuff like Alone in the Dark and Resident Evil.
Yep, but you also have stuff like, I believe, BioShock is kind of a survival horror.
BioShock to some degree, yeah, I would consider it survival horror.
So it's one of those. It spans a lot of different games, whereas BioShock is more a sci-fi survival horror. Resident Evil is more of a traditional survival horror.
Yeah, with the later games in the series being almost action horror rather than survival horror. You've got plenty of ammo in the later games, and they're more of an action control scheme than the slow plotting survival horror.
But then you have Silent Hill, which is a very traditional survival horror mystery, which is absolutely horrifying from beginning to end. At least Silent Hill 1 and 2.
Yep, Silent Hill 2 for me is still one of my favorite games in the entire horror genre.
Absolutely. Always going to be on the top of my list when thinking of horror games.
Yep. And I love the way that Silent Hill has influenced some of later games and television. But we'll talk about that more later.
Oh yeah. Pyramid Head is always going to be one of the scariest villains out there. Even today when I hear that foghorn sound, it just creeps me.
Okay. And then we've got the action horror, which a lot of the time falls, like I said, in with survival horror. But there's a great board game out now, which I would definitely place as action horror more than survival horror or anything else, called Zombicide, where oftentimes your goal is to kill as many zombies as possible,
while still collecting items and certain checkpoints and stuff like that. It's very goal-oriented.
Yeah.
But it also falls along the lines of, what is that game called, where you're running around and killing zombies and malls and stuff like that. The most recent rendition was you were in a biker and you did the zombie races.
Dead Rising.
Yeah, Dead Rising. It's very similar to Dead Rising, just in a board game form, and instead of being on your own and all the other survivors are useless, the other survivors are actually helpful.
Yes, it's a fun cooperative game. It's you and your friends against the game itself.
Oh yeah. And they have different types of zombies. lots of different types of zombies, and they have lots of different board setups and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. I have played several versions of that game and would recommend it to anybody. You can find it on Kickstarter.
Yep, it's Kickstarter and it's in many stores that sell board games now.
Oh yeah, it is totally gone mainstream, which we very much approve of.
Yep, check your friendly local game store for more.
Yep. There are also several other card games and things like that that have gone into the horror genre, like a funny little game called Gloom, which is a hysterically gloomy, horrific little card game. Another called Murder of Crows, where you're trying to figure out how you killed somebody while spelling the word murder. And then a couple of other games along those lines. They're a lot of fun to play and actually pretty funny as you go along, because some of them turn out to be you killed a man with uncooked pasta and things like that. So it can be funny as well as horrifying.
And that's the neat thing about the horror genre. It's a genre that's easy to poke fun at, and a lot of the time pokes fun at itself.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of awareness in modern horror films and TV shows, such as the recent Scream TV show and Scream Queens. They couldn't stop making fun of themselves in the genre throughout the whole series.
Oh yeah, though admittedly, Scream Queens makes fun of itself a lot more than Scream does. Scream really does take itself a lot more seriously and does, I think, a little more justice to the genre, taking a slasher film from slasher to full-on serial killer, whereas Scream Queen really camps it up and makes it a lot funnier. Some of you probably read my reviews on that one, on those series before, so if you want, you can look those up. Now, there are board games and stuff like that based on that kind of thing that are out there. I can't actually remember the name of it off the top of my head, so I'm sorry about that. It's basically you go around and you're trying to figure out who the killer in town is.
Stuff like Werewolf?
Kind of. It's very similar to One Night Ultimate Werewolf or One Night Ultimate Vampire. And in fact, there is a online game now that is very similar to that. That Markiplier and Jacksepticeye and Minion477 and MyScrum all play. That you can look up on their channel. That's basically along those same lines, where you try to figure out who the killer is.
And what's that game called?
I can't remember for the life of me.
Well, hopefully we'll figure it out.
Yeah, hopefully we'll figure it out. And I'm sorry, guys, that I can't remember. I have such a terrible memory for these kinds of things. I'm so sorry. Bad Nerd Girl. I think it was that whack on the head. Stupid brat. Can't believe she hit me. Anyway, another funny game that's in the horror genre is Munchkin Call of Cthulhu. And stuff like that pokes fun at the horror genre while at the same time allowing you to kind of ease into that sort of thing. But honestly, if you're going to jump into that kind of gameplay, there's also White Wolf's World of Darkness games. They also have Werewolf, Mage, Changeling, which is a fairy game. They also have Promethean, which is Frankenstein's monster, and lots of other games that are absolutely fantastic, and they both have tabletop and something called a Salon LARP. Salon LARP is basically the same thing as a regular LARP except no combat. Or at least no boffer combat, where you do not hit each other with weapons or anything. It's all resolved through challenges, either through dice cards or rock, paper, scissors. Yes, I know that sounds really funny, but it's actually pretty fun. It allows for a great social experience, and it can be pretty damn horrifying when you really get down to it.
As it is all about personal horror with the White Wolf World of Darkness stuff, you can get a lot of experiences playing those games you're not going to find in other tabletop role-playing games or LARPs.
Mm-hmm. Another big one that I found personally really frightening is Level 7. It's a escape game. It's kind of like a survival horror game, But it's not just about surviving, it's about getting out, which is unique to the horror genre. It's an escape horror game. It's not just about surviving. Surviving is not enough. You have to escape to survive. And the way the board is set up and the whole feel of the game is very claustrophobic. It's very intense, and it makes you feel trapped and high anxiety, and really pushes the need to escape. And for me, especially from a board game, that is incredibly well done. That speaks volumes to a board game when it's able to instill those kinds of feelings. And that's something that I think any board game should strive for when they're dealing in the horror genre, is to make you feel panicked and that need to keep moving and keep going so you can, get out or reach your goals. So, yeah, that's a big, big thing.
Yep. And that brings us to video games being influenced by films and then film influencing video games.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty obvious a lot of the time where video games have been influenced by film. I mean, without the works of George Romero, there'd be no Resident Evil.
Mm-hmm. And without Jason, Halloween, Friday the 13th, or any of the slasher films, some of the latest video games out there with the first-person killer video games, they wouldn't even exist.
Yep, but what's even more interesting to me is how film is now being influenced by video games. And I'm not just talking about direct adaptations like the Silent Hill movies and the Resident Evil.
Or World of Warcraft or anything like that.
Yeah, although, yeah. But there's almost homage to Silent Hill in the series Stranger Things on Netflix, where the whole Dark World or Other World looks like it could be taken directly from Silent Hill.
Oh, yeah. And then there's the entire feel that you get from some of the latest horror movies that seem almost directly taken from the imagination of some of the latest and greatest video game designers. Hellboy and stuff like that feels like you're walking into a video game world. Pan's Labyrinth felt the same way. It's like nothing. Like, films in the 2000s have felt like nothing anybody has seen in so long. It was incredible to watch this change overtake as being nerds just became normal. And being horror-driven things became normal in nerddom. And it wasn't just about being scared, it was the visuals, it was all that creepy, all that strangeness being explored in films and in makeup and in special effects. It's been really incredible to watch.
Yeah. It's great to see the way that directors are trying to take horror from games and incorporate it into their movies, because in games you experience horror in a far more personal manner than you do when watching a movie. Personally, I consider some of the scariest things in gaming to be the horror levels in Zelda games. They are normally in very well-lit, bright games. Even the dungeons are well-lit. And then suddenly the music enters a minor key, and there are scarier monsters around. You don't know where they're going to spring from. This, to me, even though it's not necessarily something that scares me, is a far more effective use of horror in a video game than in a lot of so-called horror games.
Oh yeah, and then the Re-Dead just suddenly screams out of nowhere and you didn't see him in the corner and he's strangling you from behind. It's just like, what the hell?
Yep, that incorporates both jump scares and building up suspense.
Oh yeah. And then a lot of directors incorporating the way horror monsters and video games move. And I actually watched a movie recently that didn't get a whole lot of good reviews on Netflix. It's called Don't Blink. But I really liked the way that you never saw and never found out what was taking everybody. You never find out, ever, what the bad guy in that movie is. You never see it.
You never see how the people disappear. They just do. And it's absolutely horrifying because you have nothing to pin down to say, this is what I have to run away from. Because it's just one of those things. One of the scariest monsters in Doctor Who was always the freaking angels, because they're fucking everywhere to me. And it's just like, it's that same concept of, you can't escape. The minute you blink, the minute you look away, they're on you. And it was the same concept, but it was worse because you couldn't see it coming. And it's just like, oh my god.
Alright, folks. Thank you very much for joining us.
This has been the Nerd Girl.
And this is Bald Mongoose.
Thank you for listening to us. And we'll see you next time on Geek Channel.
Have a very spoopy Halloween.
Bye-bye.